All right, so as in years past, we've prepared some analysis of the proposed budget, but then also incorporated some spending data as well. And so the focus here is really to look at the proposed expenditures for the new budget compared with last year's budget as well as last year's spending. The difference with this year, though, is that these are now part of a full solution. So this regularly receives financial updates from Smart Fusion, which is our financial system. And where those analyses were sort of one-offs, these can be shared now with city staff or elected officials. So if there's an interest in being able to sort of review this on your own time, please let me know. They can now be shared. And in addition to some of these detailed tools that have been built, which these can be useful for city staff in the day-to-day. It also includes the chance to include something like this, which this is just an example, but it is using last year's 2023 data for the city of Blue Island. But this is an example of like an informational dashboard that we might be able to integrate in the website just to give the public sort of a running tab on how the city is spending its money. And so again, just an example, this is something where we'll go through a design process with city staff, but the goal is to get this public-facing portal integrated this year. And then the last thing I want to show too is this includes a FOIA request portal. So even if this is just something that is given to city staff or ultimately that we incorporate into the website, the goal here is that this puts all of our financial information in a format that's readily accessible. It can be filtered, searched, and again allow just for a very fast turnaround time on FOIA request fulfillment, which I know is usually a pretty big time sink for city staff. So it's been a long time coming, so I just wanted to let everyone know that we finally sort of made this a true solution, and I'll be donating it to the city for perpetual use.
Thank you.
All right, so this is just a look at multi-year analysis, and just to put the sort of proposed budget of $49 million in spending into historical context. It's pretty much in line with the last 2 years at about $48 million appropriated. Right now we're looking at, I think we have 2015 all the way to the end of last year here. So at the top right is just sort of a trend line of revenue in green, expenses in red. So we could see during the pandemic expenses dropped off quite a bit, but since then they've kind of climbed to historic highs, but so have revenue. Below that is just a quick snapshot of our annual surplus or deficit. And so when Administrator Wogan talks about the cash that we have available on hand, this is that legacy. The city has been basically taking in more than it spends most years now for the recent past. The two visuals on the left are just a quick snapshot of where expense has grown. So at the top is by department. So what this means is that for 2015 till now, the water department is where we've seen the greatest increase in expenses. And then below that is sort of the same thing by vendor. We don't need to spend a lot of time here unless there's anything in particular somebody wants to look at. But these are interactive, right? And so if we click just on the water department, now we can see specifically the revenue and expense trend for just the water department. So again, even though it's where we've seen the highest growth, most of that is recent. We can see in the timeline that expenses actually dropped off for several years before climbing higher in the last couple of years, and I think a lot of that just accounts for specific investments in vehicles and infrastructure. Any questions on this or anything in particular that anyone wants to see before we kind of move to the more pointed budget? And of course, if anybody wants me to stop or spend more time somewhere, just let me know. Yeah.
TIF 5.
TIF 5, sure. So again, you know, this you can see that expenses have stayed pretty low, especially the last few years, and really only in the last year have we really sort of spent out of TIF 5. And then the green line shows that with only a couple years exception, more money has been going into the TIF than being taken out, at least by the City of Blue Island. And then you can see in the bottom left, the darkened sections show the vendors. So, you know, we have TIF 5 highlighted, but most of that over the time period went to Burke at 2.5 million, but then also Gallagher Asphalt and the state treasurer. I think that's for, is that maintenance?
Is there something that shows why revenue shot up so much 2022 to 2023?
So I can chime in on that one.
Yeah.
There was a appeal for the hospital, I believe, in 2022. So there was a large amount that was still owed to the county because they
I see.
appealed. So last year, we really didn't see, I think, any revenue from TIF 5
Yep.
for property. Because let's face it, your TIFs, your only revenue is your property taxes.
Right.
But once that got, you know, paid back to the
Yeah.
county, we started getting funds again. So
Okay.
that's the one-off.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
No problem.
So now, you know, since the hospital I thought funded that mostly.
Mostly, yes. But we are still getting property taxes from other entities. I haven't looked exactly what pins we're getting money from, which I can, you know, look a little deeper into that one. But that's what came in 23 was property taxes.
Anything else before I move on to the budget?
No, thanks.
Yeah, of course. All right. So this next one focuses primarily just on last year, and the red bars over on the far right are indicators of where we overspent versus what we appropriated. Some of them are really large, and this is usually just where we didn't appropriate any, but did have some expenses. But right away, so the top three are all TIF funds. So I don't know if the administration just wants to speak quickly to TIF expenses, but those, you know, at a department level, really are really the only places that we overspent the appropriation significantly. And I don't know, if that's anything you want to address.
Yeah, I think I would just say, you know, we certainly can ID any of these expenses, but these very large percentages you've seen, be careful with percentages. As you'll see, you'll have some of these TIF areas where we had, say, a few $100s, or in some cases only a few dollars allocated, and then like a $500 expense or something hits it, and it winds up looking like a very large percentage increase. So, for example, the operating transfer out on TIF 2 operations, we will certainly be able to tell you what that $3,000 is. But because the $3,000 expense hit and it didn't have anything allocated to it in the appropriation, it comes off as a 300,000% increase.
To give you a perfect example, 123rd Street by the train station is a half a block that we did because Rock Island Metro asked us to repave that. That only half a block was in a TIF. And they agreed to pave 100 feet of that street, so we jumped in and paved the other 200-300 feet out of that TIF. It was 30 grand or whatever it was. It was not a lot of money because it saved us money in the long run. It probably wasn't appropriated because we weren't planning to do it.
So yeah, if we look at what we should be, you know, concerned about, you'll see that the red lines there as an example, and I found this pretty consistent across the board. Anywhere area where you see this, well, you know, Lord, this is 50, 60, 90% increase. Usually what you have there is some explanation like that. We're dealing with relatively small dollar amounts, and not, you know, having a very large impact on the overall appropriation. As you see, some of the TIF areas that have much larger dollar amounts where our spending tends to stay between, you know, 20 to 60 to 80% of that.
And then if we flip it around and sort of look where we really underspent compared to what we appropriated, and I don't know if, you know, if that's part of this, but the business district, for example, was a department that we had appropriated 3.2 million just about too, but only spent about 400,000. So is some of that what ultimately came from TIFs, like the streetscape appropriation that, we allocated 2.5 million but only spent 189,000?
And some water and sewer that we weren't planning on spending, that we did while we were doing it, so it went across multiple funds. Alderman Rose, correct?
One thing I had a question on that stood out to me, and Lauren was starting to explain, were the police and fire pension operations. So here, I'll sort of expand those. So again, we had allocated a large amount to spend towards those, $3 and $2 million between police and fire respectively. But I think there's some lagging revenue that is earmarked for those. But again, that was another area where we very much underspent what we had originally appropriated.
So I was pulling my computer up so I could pull this. So the thing with the police and fire pension funds is that money it's kind of a wash to the city. There's a revenue and there's an expense. And it's the revenue that we levy for the property taxes that then gets spent, paid to the pension funds as our contribution. Because that money is, never really seen by the village, it's always been, or from the city, it's always been just like a year-end entry that we put on the books as a revenue and an expense. We're in the process of getting the books ready. That's actually a journal entry that's in the queue to be put in. The revenues for police was 3.1 million, which means the expense will also be 3.1 million. And the fire is 2.1 million. Once again, the expenses will be 2.1 million. So you will see that that's just kind of a complete total wash on the books.
Okay.
Because the money just goes straight from Cook County to those pension funds.
So the amount that we appropriated for or earmarked for did actually go
Yes.
into the pension
Yes.
fund? Because
So-
it looks like it may have not have, right?
Yeah,
So
correct. And if you look at your appropriation ordinance,
Mhm.
the day that I was trying to get it into the books, I was doing it late at night, and it was one of the days that the accounting system was doing one of their updates. So I made the adjustment on the ordinance so that what got approved reflected that. It just wasn't in the accounting system, which was what Alderman Roll pulled up.
So, right now it shows expense matching revenue at about 37 million. And so once all that clears, it should still be a wash, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, everything in those pension funds are a wash.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions, Paul, up here?
Yes.
Oh,
So are we up to par with both pensions?
so we have levied what is, requested of us for these pensions. Now, what comes into play there is your collection rate. So the city's doing, their part to help the situation. The collection rates is what kind of varies, and that's something that the city just doesn't really have any control over. But the city is doing their part in making sure the pensions are getting what they're needed.
So you're saying that they're caught up and not caught up?
Well, okay.
Or catching up?
I was going to say, catching up would probably be the most accurate. I mean, to fund 100% overnight is just something that no municipality could do because there was a huge lag for a lot of years.
Right.
I
So-
understand that.
So we are doing our part to help catch up, but I mean, I don't remember what the exact funding percentage you guys are at, but the actuaries end up telling the city, we recommend X amount, you're minimally required to do this amount. We're doing what we have to, be recommended and help fix the trend that was going on.
Let me sum up one thing real quick, 'cause I think I know what you're referencing, right?
Okay.
Because there has been some discussion at the civil service level in relation to, is the city funding police and fire pensions at the appropriate level? And this is a debate that happens a lot, mostly between an administration and the respective first responder unions, right? So we get a requested number from the pension systems to say, based on X amount of retirees, et cetera, here's what we would like you to pay, right? We pay that number, right? That goes back to the state and gets processed back eventually to the systems, and they make changes. No different than property taxes, there's equalization changes. They make changes, and then what ultimately gets back to the pension systems winds up being a little bit less. All right?
So I
So,
understand what
so
you're saying.
the city is doing, it's meeting its request.
Right. That really wasn't the question, but I thank you for that. The question was, I knew that we were behind and money was taken from the pensions 2 administrations ago. And I was just asking where that, where we're at right now with it, you know what I'm
For
saying?
the last 4 or 5 years, we've done a few percentage points above the minimum levied amount.
Okay.
And we've consistently-
So we have been trying to make up for it. We have been trying to make up for the fact that there was underfunding in the
Right,
past.
and that was my
Because
question.
what you're describing is just underfunding by a different name,
Okay.
right? So we're trying to make up for the
And
underfunding.
that's what I was asking, where we're at right
Yeah,
there.
I
Thank
think
you.
what Alderman Johnson was referring to, I think that was right, maybe when I first became alderman,
Lauren, don't run away.
and it was a really big deal, because there wasn't any money being put into the.
That's
police,
correct.
Right, isn't that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So
Okay, so that was,
then,
and that was before we were here, so I didn't know that was a thing.
oh, yeah,
So-
yes, it was huge.
So that's, so hopefully was I able to answer?
So we're working on it.
You're working on it, yes.
Okay.
So again, I think, at a department level, we really stayed within budget, but is there anywhere the administration wants to spend some time or focus, or is there any particular department or fund that anyone here would like to drill into further? Otherwise, I can move on to the budget-to-budget comparison.
Any questions before we move on? All right, call the roll.
All right. All right, so this last one looks a lot like the old one. It's a little bit busier, but mostly, again, this is for focusing on just comparing the proposed budget to last year's. This column here that says budget change is basically sorting, again, at a department level where the proposed budget changes most year over year from last year's. So at the top is the Department for Motor Fuel Tax Operations, which is increasing by almost $1 million. And then at the very bottom is Public Works, which we're decreasing by a similar amount. Again, is there anywhere the administration wants to sort of focus in initially, or is there anywhere that anyone here in particular would like to look at? I think for the Public Works, we can drill into that, and I believe it's vehicles that accounts for a lot of that.
Yeah, the public works drop was,
We bought a lot of stuff.
we were very much playing, let me get on mic.
Catch up.
We were very much playing catch up on public works vehicles. I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more detail about what we got and everything, but those are large one-off purchases, basically, that accounts for the majority of that.
Yeah, and all up, again, it's only about $1 million more this year in the appropriation, 3% change. So it really is, very similar to last year's. For motor fuel tax, again, the red bars here, just like the last page, show us where we did significantly overpay. So like, for example, it looks like we did not budget for salt to be paid for out of it last year, though we did spend. And now that's one area that this particular department, the funding has gone up. And I'm guessing this is a question that even though we did not pay for street and resurfacing repair out of this department, to the extent that we allocated last year, it does look like, because we've increased it to 3.29 million, that we are anticipating paying for street and resurfacing out of this fund, or out of this department.
Yes, so the plan for this year, so the city, over the last several years, has received Rebuild Illinois money to be used for, streets. And so this year, we're working with the engineers to do what we have to do to release, I don't want to say release those funds, but legally access those to pay for the streets this year. So we're working with Burke Engineering now. So you guys have the money in hand. We're just going through the approval with IDOT to use it for the road program.
Josh?
Yeah.
2 questions here. One,
Sure.
the budget change that you show, that is literally from the appropriation last year to the appropriation this year, or is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so, and just from my perspective, I find it more useful to take a quick look at what did we actually spend versus what are we budgeting this year?
Yeah.
That's
I was
how I-
gonna ask
That's
that
all
too.
on here, yeah. So if you
So
look
you
at
can
the
do that, right?
the expenditures column is what we spent last year. And
Where?
In the second-
expenditures column.
That's
So
like third column there.
the first column is last year's budget. The second one, expenditures, is what we spent last year. And that third one with the red bars shows
So
where
this
we,
one right here.
yeah, that shows our spending from last year. And then you have the proposed budget and the change. So there's a lot going on there, Bill, but.
But you
all
could,
that
you could,
information
you
is
could
on
do
there.
that comparison.
Yeah, yeah,
right.
and so
Okay.
I can share this with you, and, you know, again, there's a lot to take in, but
Right.
all that is there to
Yeah.
compare.
Okay.
All right, so the second department on the list with the most change was Gen Gov. It looks like the lion's share of that was for building maintenance and repair, which we've added about $500,000 to. If I forgot what that was for, I apologize, but.
Building maintenance and repair, that was the windows, right? Is it the windows, right?
Yeah.
That's-
Wait a minute, what is that?
City Hall, yeah.
So under Gen Gov, I'm looking at the top
Oh.
account, which is building maintenance and
Oh, I see.
repair. Yeah.
That was for windows and other building repairs for City Hall.
Okay. And then abandoned house expense, we allocated 100,000 last year, but did not spend out of it, but we have boosted it by another 275,000 this year. So I don't know, again, if that's just,
Mark, you want that one? Yeah, that's just for the Strong Communities Program grant fund that we received.
oh, okay.
We demolished 4 houses already. We plan on demolishing approximately 10 more this year, so
Okay.
just want to make sure we appropriate for the full amount.
Awesome. And then there's some for police and fire. I'm happy to drill into any of those, but I did want to go down to public works where, again, it's one of the biggest changes, but in the negative. And again, if we scroll down, oh, yeah, I did want to point out too, we did reduce our expected cost for garbage and recycling, so that was nice to see. It seems like the bulk pickup
I meant to highlight
process
that.
has smoothed out a bit. So that represents a $250,000 reduction in expense for.
Just to put a pin on that, because I really did mean to highlight that, and I know Mike Schroeder's here, but it's a very good credit to our Public Works team. If just as a brief history from last year and a half ago, one of the bigger things this council did was the new garbage contract, right? And we spent a lot of time working on that and figuring out how we can get our bulk costs down. And we set a budget number that was anticipating some savings on that. And the Public Works guys, with Mike having to implement a difficult change there, actually came in about 400,000 under the reduction that we put in already. We always said we had an anticipated reduction, and they came in under that. So it's a big time savings, and it is a very good example of an idea happening at this meeting, getting implemented by our teams in the field, resulted in some real savings for the city.
So we could have hired 2 more public works people, right?
Yeah.
In theory.
And then machinery and equipment, vehicles, and street light installation repair represent the other big declines year over year. Vehicles, I think it's just, we don't expect to get what we've ordered, right? And we had appropriated quite a bit last year at 600,000. And we've reduced that by 200,000 this year. We only spent a fraction of that.
That's good.
That's
So those are really the only areas I want to call out. Again, not a lot of change year over year, but happy to sort of dive in, anywhere else on anyone else's behalf here. Or again, these can be shared for folks that want to maybe just take some time to look through these on their own.
And you can send this to us, Josh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is there a date by what time, when do you think we would be able to access this online?
No. So
Mike?
for you as an elected official, this can be shared now.
Live?
Yes.
Okay, so you will get a URL, and we can go to it and look at it?
Correct.
Yes,
Okay,
but
great.
it's not for sharing generally.
Gotcha, yeah, okay.
It's just for us, it hasn't,
But the ultimate goal is to make it publicly available.
Right.
Well, yeah, and this page here was an example, and this, oops, 1 second. Just an example of something that we might surface to the public, right? That, it's interactive, it would update
Yeah.
frequently, just again, to provide high-level information.
Right. Sure.
And up to date. But again, this will be something I think we go through a design process and bring back to the council before we actually put it on the website.
Okay.
Just a lot we want to be careful of before we
Yep.
surface data. We want to be
Right.
sure that we trust it, it's been vetted.
This is, I really appreciate this, Alderman Rowe and,
Yeah, it's been very useful
Mr.
in the
Wogan
process.
and Mr. Potaskin, as well as the mayor, because this is some of the things that we were standing on. I know Nancy and I, because we've been around for a minute, to have, where the people could see actual things happening.
Yes.
One of my stands was in a forensic audit, because in our early tenure, we couldn't see where our money was going, but wasn't nothing being done as well.
Yep.
So now we can see where our money's going, and we can actually physically see things are happening,
Yes.
and that helps us with the John Q. public, who asks questions and want to know, and they should, because they're taxpayers.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know it sounds corny, but I'm just very proud of the city, and I think when you look at where we started financially
Yes.
2 years ago to where we're
Yes.
at now, and it took all hands on deck to
Yes.
get here. It's just, it's pretty awesome. So that's all I had, but do reach out, just let me know if you're interested in getting copies of these to review.
Great.
Definitely.
Well, you did a great job, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. It's a lot of hard work.
Well worth it.